Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
So we come off of 2 weeks of doing what the people want. Now we're coming back to doing what I want to do. I don't know if I more often than not choose the movies here, mostly because you, Craig, tend to be more like, whatever. You'll just sort of go along with everything I suggest, which I love. And I think sometimes you regret it. Mm-hmm. And then you give me shit for it, so I guess that's like my payment, I suppose, is to...
Yeah, get ready.
Well, today's movie is the 1971 West German Spanish lesbian vampire movie Vampyros Lesbos, which has been on my list for us to watch for a long time because, as you know, I'm a very big supporter of the LGBTQ community.
Don't do that. Fuck you. I don't need your support. Or your lesbian vampires.
What's wrong with my lesbian vampires? This is the first in a month-long series of lesbian vampire movies. We're hitting up a new theme month. Craig doesn't know it yet.
You're absolutely wrong. That's the thing. You are right when you... I have said to you a bazillion times, because you throw shit like this at me, and I'm like, I don't say no. I will not say no. I am really reevaluating my position on that after this.
After this one, huh? This is the one it took? Wow.
Todd, this movie is terrible.
Well,
it's
I'm not going to say that...
porn. Let's just be straight about it.
It's not
just
porn.
Yes, it is.
No,
it's just porn. This is porn for men in the 70s who were too pussy to buy real porn, who were too ashamed to go in and actually like buy porn. They could rent this and be like, no, this is legitimate film. Okay, whatever. It's not, but that's fine.
You're right about the fact that, yes, this is, first and foremost, this is an exploitation film. Almost everything we do on this podcast is an exploitation film. And we've seen it in all sorts of extremes, okay? We've seen super extreme violence. We've seen way more porny sex than you'll ever see in this movie. This movie is filled with nudity. And yes, it's long, leering shots up close of women's bodies and gives girls an excuse to rub their hands all over each other and stuff like that. But it is a far cry from porn. It's not porn.
Well, I guess it depends on how you define porn then. I guess we don't need to get into it. It's Playboy Channel, at least.
It's very tame. You're right, but very tame Playboy Channel from maybe back in the 80s or something like that. It's extremely tame nudity, but it's not porn. It's absolutely not.
I will agree with you on technical terms.
No, if you call it porn, you're going to give our listeners the wrong idea because, like I said, we have seen movies.
Okay, fine, then it's just trash. Like, don't want to call it porn, that's fine. It's just trash then. Like,
it was a big hit in Europe when it came out, I'll tell you that. It was a different time.
F***ing Europeans. Trash.
1971. Well, look, the director of this movie, and another reason why I wanted to do this movie, and by the way, no, this movie, I'm completely joking about. We're not going to be going into deep discussions of gender roles and queer theory when we talk about this movie. It's 100% for the male gaze, obviously. But the director of this film, Jess Franco, is one of the most prolific filmmakers ever. And that's not necessarily a compliment. Like, most of what he made was garbage. And he knew he was making garbage. And he said, I don't think I've ever made a good film. He always wanted to, but what he was primarily known for was getting cheap exploitation films in under budget and on time. And that allowed him to basically do whatever he wanted. And so that's how he made his money. Spanish filmmaker who made women in prison movies, a lot of horror movies like this, lots of sort of softcore, not porn, but like this movie, where it's just a lot of looking at girls' bodies or things, or sex comedies and stuff like that. But this guy made over 200 movies. He also scored and wrote the films. He's often compared to Ed Wood as this guy who, very prolific, made a lot of movies, lots of enthusiasm for films, but quite incompetent. Really wasn't even, always able to put together anything that's beyond just exploitation. But anyway, he made this movie in 1971, and one of the stars of this film, Soledad Miranda, who plays
the vampire, Nadia.
She plays the vampire, yeah, and Countess Nadine Carody.
Oh, yeah.
Carody, yeah. She was on to become possibly a big international star. This was like his one discovery. Like, he found her, he put her in a couple movies, which gained her sudden popularity in Europe. And she was really poised to be like an international superstar when she sadly died in a car accident.
Oh.
At the age of 27.
Oh my God, actually, that's awful.
Yeah, 1970 was the date of her accident. This movie came out in 71, and I think there were 3 or 4 other movies she had already shot that came out after her death. And so, yeah, really sad. Like, this woman, I think, is captivating on the screen. She's gorgeous.
Stunningly beautiful, yeah.
She's stunningly beautiful. She has these really piercing eyes. Obviously, nobody in this movie really gets a chance to showcase their acting talents and stuff, but just the fact that she can go through some of these really, really long takes without cracking a smile or or cracking up. I give all the actors credit for that in this movie, honestly.
I can't believe that's like the barometer against which we're measuring. Like, oh, well, at least they didn't crack up. God.
Oh, man. I'm going to be alone here. I'm not going to praise this as a great movie, but I think this is a notorious movie. It was very successful when it came out in Europe and then subsequently was released around the world. It was one of his few films to get a U.S. release. With over 200 movies, the percentage of movies that were actually even dubbed into English are a smaller fraction of that, and this was one of them. The version we saw, I don't know if it was originally shot. I think it was shot in German, obviously dubbed. Even the German is dubbed because all the actors in here aren't even necessarily German. There's Spanish actors in here. There's a very, very famous British actor. But yeah, anyway, it was quite popular at the time in Europe, had some success, again, as an exploitation film in the United States, is constantly found on lists of lesbian vampire movies, that kind of thing. He also directed a Count Dracula movie this same year with Bruce Lee, and she was in it as well as Lucy. Did I say Bruce Lee? I meant Christopher Lee.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Christopher Lee.
I was really I was like, I could maybe get behind a Bruce Lee vampire movie.
That would be crazy. We've come real close. No, this movie, actually, I wouldn't mind watching. It's a PG movie, and it's Bram Stoker's Count Dracula, directed and co-written by him, and it stars Christopher Lee as Count Dracula, Klaus Kinski as Renfield, Fred Williams as Jonathan Harker, and again, the beautiful Soledad Miranda as Lucy. So I'd be kind of interested in checking it out one of these days, but this is the movie we're talking about today. So anyway, I had not seen it before. It was a little hard to get a hold of, although it has had a recent couple DVD releases and with some restoration involved. I was glad to have seen it, and I'm sorry. I was just as painful for me to slog through as it was for you, so don't get all uppity on me about it.
I doubt that.
Well, maybe a little less painful. I mean, it is kind of sad when this erotic movie with tons of female nudity finds me so bored at one point that I'm just getting up and walking out of the room to go to the bathroom without pausing it. That's how bad it is. Even the erotic scenes are boring.
Yeah. Oh, man. I don't know what to say about it.
You've heard of this before, though, right? I mean,
No.
No.
No. Nobody has heard of this.
You're all over the horror sites, and you've never run across Vampyros Lesbos.
No, and I always feel like I'm doing ads for people, and they're not paying me, so I shouldn't. But one of the main horror sites that I look at is Bloody Disgusting, and I went to their site because they have a search option and searched this title, and I don't think that it was mentioned once in 2016 because somebody in Hollywood was throwing a Vampyros Lesbos party. That was the only thing that had been written about it.
I'd go to that party.
Yeah, I bet you would. And I just did, a Google search on it, and I just didn't, I couldn't find anything about it, aside from a Wikipedia page and the IMDb page. So I don't think that this is as widely known as you think, at least not in America. What I will say, I guess, and this is being kind, is that maybe in 1971, something like this would be a little bit more sensational and subversive and less available. And so maybe that would explain why it was popular. It's just it's a girly show. It's a nudie show. That's it. Like, even though I'm not physically attracted to women, I can still appreciate the beauty of a woman's body, and I do. And the women in this movie are beautiful, and they have beautiful bodies, but I don't need to leer at them for an hour and a half. The poor girl who plays the main lady,
Linda Westinghouse, U.S. Stromberg.
U.S. Stromberg. She is buck naked for 80% of this movie. Just running around naked. And Soledad Miranda's naked probably 50%.
Most of it.
At least.
Oh, more, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she's mostly naked all the time when she's in it.
So?
Again, I'm saying, like, if I were a straight man in 1971 who didn't, obviously have the internet and who would actually have to walk into a store and hand somebody else money for pornography, maybe this would have been a nice alternative. Well, but I can see boobs anywhere, anytime, all day. Like, this is not titillating. And on top of that, it's just a bad movie. Like, it's terrible. It's terrible. The acting is maybe one of the better things about it, but it's still really bad. The cinematography is not good. The plot doesn't make... Excuse me, listeners, I'm sorry, but I have strong feelings about this movie, and so I'm probably going to be swearing more than usual. Now, Todd, I know
you were going to make me have to edit out all of your
F-off. You're going to have to... Yes, because this movie is so fucking stupid. Like, I had no idea what was going on most of the time, and that was compounded by the fact that they cast two blonde women who are identical to one another.
Oh, you're talking about the other woman's not in it much. Yeah.
But she popped up and I had no idea who she was, and I thought she was still the other lady.
You thought she was Linda.
Yeah.
You're talking about Agra. Okay.
Yes, and Todd first sent this movie to me, and I started watching it and got a good almost 10 minutes in before I realized that it was in German without subtitles, because the first 10 minutes are just this lady dancing around naked, and then finally they start talking and it's in German, and so I turned it off and I told him, and he sent me subtitles. It was fine, but honestly, I could have watched it without the subtitles and understood it as well as I did. It just didn't make any sense. It was stupid. Yeah,
it doesn't have much of a plot. And I think that's a strength of it, actually, honestly, because if it made more sense, it would probably be even dumber. I mean, look, this is just one tiny movie out of a gigantic pool of similar type films from the 60s. Unless you were seeing major Hollywood productions in the 60s or campy B-movie, PG black and white B-movies or whatever that were still being produced, then there's this huge thing in the middle where with the sexual liberation, and of course Europe has always been more, sexually liberal when it comes to filmmaking and things and stuff like that, and didn't have all the strict codes and stuff like that. But these films were being pumped out by the thousands, and we're not just talking horror. We're talking, sort of swinging spy comedies, like crazy slapstick sex comedies, erotic globe-trotting adventure kind of things. Like, you can say they're erotic because they have lots of boobs and things in them. What they don't have is hardcore sex. In fact, usually not even like that much sex at all. It's mostly about leering at naked women. And again, that runs the gambit as well. Some of them were more exploitative than others. Some of them had more art to them. Some of them were just cheaply made and put out, as fast as possible to get money. And this, I think, is definitely more on that end of the spectrum. But this isn't porn, and it's not, I mean, of course, to modern sensibilities, this is not the movie that anybody makes today. Nobody makes a movie like this now, right? They have no appeal anymore. But back then, this was huge. Women in prison movies. I mean, this is movies like this where a lot of stars that we end up seeing in horror movies, a decade or two later, sometimes got their start in. Blaxploitation films are not far removed from this kind of thing too, with the sex and all that, and the nudity and things. And so Pamela Grier, I think, was in several of Jess Franco's women in prison movies before she broke out. So I don't want to just roundly dismiss this for what it is. You know what I mean?
But that's not fair either, because I can get behind all of that. Like, Erotica is nothing new. Erotica is, a tale as old as time. And there still is a market, I think, for like softcore stuff.
Yes.
Which I would argue that this kind of is. You're right. It's not porn. I'm exaggerating. But that's it. It feels, this movie, I'm sure there are better quality films in this category that I would have despised less than I despise this movie, because this movie just,
for sure,
it doesn't take any care. I have literally seen porn movies that are better than this movie, just in a cinematic or narrative way.
Yeah, but I've also seen some that are way worse. I mean,
obviously, but we're talking about I don't want to get into a whole discussion about what our porn preferences are, but like I'm talking about movies that were made around this time, and there's all kinds of scandal, when it comes to the porn industry at this time. But I'm talking about things like Deep Throat or The Devil and Miss Jones. Like these were hardcore porn movies.
A little later, but yeah. Uh-huh.
Right, that kind of infiltrated the mainstream kind of for the first time, in large part because, not to say necessarily that they were great movies, but at least there was a little bit of care with narrative and storytelling and that kind of thing. And God, I don't know. I think I don't want people to think that I'm only being critical because of the lascivious nature of the movie. I don't care about that. I am not
prude.
I'm right. I'm not a prude. I'm not opposed to nudity. I'm not opposed to graphic stuff. I'm not opposed to actual pornography. I support sex workers. I am not prudish in that way. I just think that this is a shitty movie.
Okay, so let's talk about it on those merits. I agree. I mean, it is a shitty movie. It's a shitty exploitation movie, not unlike many that came out around this time. I do think it does have a little bit more care, but we can talk about that. I mean, I felt like the movie itself had a sort of dreamlike quality that would pop in and out every now and then. And then it would put you to sleep, and where you would have actual dreams.
Well, dreamlike in that it makes no sense and you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, but initially, anyway, I found that intriguing. Initially, I found that intriguing until I got into the movie and realized that it wasn't going to commit to that at all, and it was just, the rest of it was just kind of sloppy and boring and pedantic.
I just felt like it failed on every level. Like, I felt like it was trying to do something and failing. Like, I don't understand the weird-ass, creepy chanting that would just pop in every once in a while.
Now you're talking about the soundtrack, and I'll tell you, the reason that I bumped this up higher in the top of the list is because I recently discovered the soundtrack, and I thought the soundtrack was killer. Did you listen to it?
No, in a different context, I think I could have appreciated the score. It was very reminiscent of like 70s porn.
No. I mean, 70s porn is like jazz and stuff. I think this is reminiscent of, this is like psychedelic type music.
It made me think of like Austin Powers. Like,
yes, exactly. Like Austin Powers type psychedelic type music. And this was Jess Franco's first film to have this kind of score behind it. And I thought that the juxtaposition of this bouncy, kind of happy, kind of psychedelic music, along with what otherwise, I mean, if I was just shown this imagery and asked to score it, it would have been very different from that.
Right.
You know, I would have been trying to make it more mysterious and kind of sensual and stuff. And this is just, even when what's happening on the screen is very slow and like over the top, I don't even want to say dramatic, just like plodding along of just these, like you just get really long takes of nothing but, in one case, this woman doing this sort of lame dance performance on a stage that involves her slowly taking her clothes off and draping them over another naked woman and then coming behind her and switching clothes with her and running her hand all over her body. And it's just like, oh my God, this has been going on for 10 minutes and it's putting me to sleep.
Yeah, and fortunately for us, we get to see it twice. Same routine. Like, it's not like they just it's not like they filmed it once and then showed it twice. Like, she just does the same thing twice. Right. And it goes on literally, I would have to say a good 5 minutes, and it feels much longer. To the point where I was just like, I was intentionally trying to find something else to look at. I'm like, I've already seen this.
Yeah, me too. Yet, okay, going back to the score though, yet this had this peppy, cool music behind it, I thought. And so anyway, I fell in love with that music, and I thought, well, a movie with this music scoring it, and this score was fairly recently rediscovered. I think sometime in the mid '90s, they released this score out called Vampyros Lesbos Psychosexual Dance Party, and released it in Britain, and it was a bit of a hit for a while.
Right.
And you can go find it on YouTube, and I sent that to you. Like I said, before I even saw the movie, I heard the score, and I thought, God, if the score is this good, at least that's going to be entertaining. And that probably was one of the more entertaining things in the movie.
Fair.
That being said, it also was a little reminiscent of the kind of stuff that Goblin and Argento do with the chanting that seems to come in at odd places that I would argue makes things a little unsettling. I mean, it's bizarre tonally, but it's bizarre in a way that kind of, I don't know what, it just plays with your senses a little bit, and I find it a little unsettling. I found parts of this film, the parts that weren't boring as hell, were a little unsettling at times. And I think that's an accident, honestly, and maybe more a function of the editing than is actually the filmmaking. And, of course, the nonsensical nature of the plot adds a dreamlike quality to the whole thing, whether you want to give him credit for that being intentional or not. But, you know, on its merits as a completed film, I actually found the first 10 minutes intriguing as any other of these horror movies from about this era that are kind of trying to do something different or trying to be a little more art housey. We start off with that weird dance sequence, like you said, which is more or less happening in what would be like, I guess, a 60s era, what you might call strip club in Istanbul, where things are just a little more like burlesque.
Kind of.
Like this has some pretensions to art. She's got a candelabra and a mirror and all that. And it's this woman who we talked about earlier playing the Countess Carity. But we don't know any of this. All we know is something weird's happening on stage, and I thought that was kind of captivating. And then we see that there are people watching it, and there's this back and forth cutting between her and the woman you mentioned later, Linda, who is kind of our main character, played by Uwe Stromberg, who's sitting with a guy named Omar, who's like her boyfriend or something.
And every shot of her is just her, like, dead-faced and wide-eyed, like...
Well, I mean, I thought that was more to show that she was getting turned on by it.
I guess. Oh, God.
It's closed in her eyes and all that, yeah.
The opening sequence, it was surreal to an extent, because I think with the music largely adds to that, but I think at first, now I could be wrong, but I think that at first the other naked woman on stage appears to be a mannequin.
Yeah.
But then when she starts interacting with it, it's obviously a person.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know if that was... I don't know what it was supposed to be. I honestly don't know. It is... I mean, to be fair, it is erotic. These are beautiful women. You know, this scene standalone, I don't hate. It's just... in the context of this movie that I hate, it's I don't know.
You're not gonna give it too much credit because there's really no payoff.
Right, exactly. I have in my note, Vamp Lady touches herself in front of a mirror. There are a bunch of pervs watching. I also know that this was and is a thing. Like, these sorts of erotic performances, even live sex shows, are a thing. I remember I went to Amsterdam, and other people, when I was studying abroad, and other people kind of in my study abroad group had gone to Amsterdam and had gone to live sex shows, and I had absolutely no interest.
Yeah.
I can't imagine sitting in a room full of other people watching people have sex. Like, that's just so...
Yeah.
I don't get it.
That'd be difficult for me, but...
You're just sitting in... I was going to go down a road that I'm not going.
Well, they're not having sex.
No, they're not. I mean, they're not. But she's definitely touching this other woman's body and in sensual ways, and it is sensual and erotic. I think that the actress does a good job, and obviously is vulnerable in doing all of this in the nude, and she has a beautiful body and all of that. So I'm not critical necessarily of that in particular. You're right. The blonde, who we come to find out is Linda in the audience, is totally into it. But then, like, it's cutting between the show and her face, and then just all these weird images.
Yeah.
Like drops of blood dripping down a window. A scorpion that we see 500 times.
Yeah. A kite. A kite flying through the air.
Yeah.
Some cabanas, like by a seaside dock, and somewhere I think we learn is a Turkey, or this is all taking place in Turkey too, and was shot in Turkey. And I loved seeing actually some of that late '60s footage of Turkey. But it's a little, it throws you off a little bit, because then there's this Linda, I'm calling you. With all those shots, you're like, is this supposed to be where they are? Are we moving on to a new spot? No, this is her dream.
Yeah, right. Like after the show, I guess.
Yeah, and she's being haunted by this woman, right? Like there's a sense that she feels like she's being called. Like she can't get this out of her mind, and there's this voice, and there's all these images that she can't make sense of. And the next thing we see is she's in a psychiatrist office. She's laying down, talking to her therapist, and she's describing this. And that's when it finally grounds. Oh, okay, now we know it's a dream. Okay, now we know she's haunted. She's describing this to her therapist, who is, drawing pictures instead of actually making notes. And she's telling him that she was aroused by this. And he says, look, I think this means you're just sexually frustrated. You need to find a lover, a better lover. And so she returns to their seaside resort by the beach. And actually, I don't think this is a resort. I think this is where she lives, because she works for this company called Simpson & Simpson.
Which is so clunky. Like,
it's super clunky.
They just need to get her to this vampire lady somewhere. So, I work somewhere where I have to go talk to this lady about an inheritance.
Clunkier than that, because we see her in her office. It's like... It's like a 30-second scene where somebody comes up to her and says, oh, miss, there's this thing, and there's this account, and there's this account. And then she stops her and just announces to her coworker, oh, I need to go to Anatolia to see the Countess Carity about an inheritance. Like, what?
Yeah.
And then, boom, she's now...
going to these islands.
On a boat.
Right.
Yeah, to this island, yeah. And she's at the hotel, but the boat has already left to take her to... this other place. So the guy there says that the Countess has booked a room for her. And so this weird guy named Mamet, who works there.
I called him Igor because I didn't know his name, and that's what he reminded me of, this little hunchback guy. Like, I expected him when he was leading her to her room to say, walk this way. Like,
yes. He had that vibe. And this is the director of the movie, by the way. This is Jess Franco. And,
that's hilarious. I wish I had known that. I would have thought that was funny.
Yeah.
But it's really funny because, like, he takes her to her room, and it seems like, is kind of putting the moves on her or something. But she, like, lays down and has a little nap mare. and wakes up, and then goes walking around the building, this hotel or whatever, and Igor like pulls her aside and is like, "Don't go to that island. Death lives there." Or something like that. And then he's like, "Come to the wine cellar later." And by later, he meant 5 seconds from now.
Yeah, the next scene.
Because she goes there, sees him torturing a woman, and goes about her business. Like, never doesn't say anything to him, doesn't report it to anybody else, just moving on.
Yeah. Gets on her boat. That was pretty jarring. Oh, but when she gets to the island, we see that it is like the cabanas from her dreams, and she sees the same kite flying in the air and all that.
Here's
again, like you said, we get some images. The scorpions are, walking around where she is. There's Linda, and there's this man with groovy sunglasses watching her from behind a net.
It's her Renfield.
Yeah, her Renfield or her familiar.
Yeah.
And she enters the cabana and is like, hello, is anyone home? And she can't really find anybody. And then she wanders outside and boom, there is Countess Carity laying out in a bikini. And her suggestion is, hey, before you get settled down, why don't we go swimming?
But I didn't bring my bathing suit. Oh, my God.
That's okay. No need to be shy. Nobody can see you here. So they go out, and then we have a nice swinging 60s, like skinny dipping, lounging on the beach kind of bit.
Right.
With the upbeat music. And yeah, and then they're back at the long table in the cabana with 2 candelabras having dinner, and they have some discussion that's finally going to try to move this plot forward a little bit.
So stupid. The what's her name? Nadia? Is that her name? She's like... No, actually, Linda's like, "So you inherited this estate from Dracula? Do you know Dracula?"
That's right.
And the Countess is like, "Yeah, my family knows him," or whatever. Like, they don't really talk about it. And then there's just some very intense eye gazing.
Yes.
And then the Countess.
Lots of zooming and panning, by the way. Tons of zooming in this movie. Oh my God, there's so many.
And the Countess pours them wine, and the Countess is like, "I love red wine." So stupid. And then Linda has like one drink of this wine. I don't know if it's roofied or what, but she immediately has a headache and like, maybe I better lie down, and immediately passes out on the table. Yep. Mm-hmm. And the creepy guy who is what's her name's familiar or whatever, his name's Morpho. Hilarious.
Morpho the Magnificent.
He like she just snaps at him like a dog. Like, she never says anything other, like, she's like, "Morpho."
Well, and he never talks.
Morpho. And he just does whatever she wants him to do. I loved that part.
Right. He's under her spell.
So he carries her to bed. This all happens so quickly and still feels like,
so slowly.
I swear to God, I was looking at the timestamp every couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And 15 minutes in, I was like, oh my God, there's still an hour and 15 minutes left. And it felt like that the whole time.
Yeah, it's true.
He carries her and puts her in a bed. And then the Countess appears. When she wakes up, the Countess is in her room, like behind some billowy curtains. There are lots of billowing curtains in this movie. Mm-hmm. And she's standing there. She has blood on her lips. Why? I have no idea. And then in my notes, the next thing I have is uncomfortable boob fondling, kissing. And then they get down on the floor and I don't know, she's fondling her boobs and kissing her and stuff.
I'm not sure what they're doing, yeah.
And then, so the Countess bites her neck and is like sucking on it for a while and then comes up and is slobbering bloody slobber all over her, and it was the most unsexy thing I have ever seen.
It was definitely not sexy.
It was gross. It was disgusting. It looked like real saliva, like she just built up a whole mouthful of saliva and then like popped a little blood capsule in there or something, and it just ran out of her mouth. It was disgusting.
It's a low budget movie. I'm sure that's exactly what happened.
So gross.
Linda's passed out by now, and then she wakes up by herself. She goes downstairs and walks outside to find the Countess floating dead in the pool.
Yeah, but why does she just assume that she's dead?
Well, I mean, her eyes are open and she's floating there, not moving, and she's got the blood on her mouth. I don't know. She does. You're right. She makes no effort to go out and go, "Hey, are you okay?"
Well, we have no idea what happens because the next time we see Linda, she's like catatonic in a hospital, and we find out through dialogue that she was like found on the beach and has amnesia.
Yeah, it's a pretty jarring cut to this other woman that you're talking about, who I also thought that it was Linda at first.
Because they're identical twins. The only difference is the Agra.
Well, they call her Agra.
She looks maybe a little bit older, and she has slightly shorter hair. Those, like, beyond that, they are both platinum blondes with long hair, ice blue eyes.
Like every other actress from this era. Yeah, that's a common problem with these movies, honestly, that I have anyway. They've all got the same hairstyle, same hair color, the same makeup. Well, she's we find out she's in a room in some kind of facility, which turns out to be Dr. Seward's private clinic.
This guy, what an asshole.
Yeah.
He's such a douchebag. Both of the doctors in this movie are such douchebag, but this guy's particularly douchey. And
the Dr. Steiner,
the one
who kind of comes running in.
Whichever one is like
he's
treating these women, but is also interested in the occult and blabbers on and on and on about he's so annoying.
Well, this Agra gal is supposed to be like the Lucy, I think, of this particular version of Dracula, because we come to find out she's coming back. I knew it. She'll take hold of me again, and I'm so happy. Help me so she won't leave me again. Right. So, she's kind of flipping out.
She's
right.
She's a previous lover, but and I guess that is Nadine's MO. That's what she does. She lays it out. She tells Morpho. Like, Morpho doesn't know.
Yeah, she eventually just says,
right, like,
well, we need to know.
Right.
That's what it's for.
I mean, we can talk more about backstory and exposition in a second, but basically what she says is she loves women and she loves seducing women, and that's what she does. But she's obsessed with or in love with Linda. This one's different.
Yeah.
She's actually really obsessed with this one. So Agra is just some former woman that she has done this to, who she doesn't care about. But also, like, those scenes with Agra were really uncomfortable because she appears to be either in sexual ecstasy or painfully horny.
Like, somebody needs to get this woman a vibrator
immediately, least, right? Like on an emergency basis. Like, get out the emergency vibrator because this woman is in need.
She needs a release badly.
But it was uncomfortable to watch because she's just writhing around, like touching herself, like thrusting her pelvis into the floor, moaning and groaning all the time.
Honestly, I couldn't tell if it was just poor acting on the part of a person who's supposed to be in agony, or if it was supposed to be very, very sexual.
Oh, I think it was definitely supposed to be sexual. And as it was very uncomfortable, but whoever that poor actress was, she went for it. Like,
she did.
Good for you.
And they don't cut away. I mean, I think this is part of the cheap nature of this. There's not a lot of cutting here. So these scenes play out in like one long take. And like I said, if there needs to be camera movement, the camera's on a tripod and it's just zooming in there and panning over there. Like, there's no dolly shots in here. There's very little care taken with the filmmaking. In fact, these scenes up in her room and anything that does not have a naked woman involved seems to be lit very poorly and kind of just poorly filmed.
Yeah.
When there is a naked woman involved, it's like,
oh yeah, beautifully
lit, cheesecloth, there's a very big stylistic difference between the two things. And it was, and even times when it's just out of focus.
Yes.
In some of these.
Right.
Which is really irritating.
Right. Like, if there are no boobs, what's there to look at? Like, why even bother to focus the camera?
Exactly. I love this, though. This is just
it's
fun.
Infuriating because apparently Linda is also under this doctor's care. she has amnesia. She doesn't even know who she is until she just does. And then she just doesn't have amnesia anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Can't remember her name, can't remember anything until eventually she does.
5 seconds after saying she has amnesia. And then, like, her boyfriend comes to fetch her because he read about this mystery woman in the paper. He's like, oh, she's missing, so that must be her.
It must be her.
And
I came about the woman you found on the beach. Yeah, that kind of thing.
God, yeah, I'm here about that woman. Oh,
yeah.
So then she doesn't have full amnesia anymore, but she doesn't. She says, I don't remember what happened on the island except for everything that happened. Like,
except all I'm seeing in my head is a dead, naked Countess Carity floating in a swimming pool, and I wonder if it was just a dream or not. And all of this is done in voiceover, where we see them walking around, kind of like going into cafes and kind of hanging out at their house or whatever. And this is cutting with shots of Countess Carity, clearly very much alive, looking at them through like panes of glass or from like a cafe across the street, from windows that we can't see because it's framed up too tightly. And again, this is another spot where I actually felt like the movie was doing a decent job of throwing a little mystery my way. You know, I didn't know, was it a dream? Like, so much of that was surreal anyway, and now she's out of it, and now they're cutting to Countess Carity, who's clearly alive, and she's looking on to her. So she's not dead. Was she pretending to be dead? All of that. Why did she just leave her? Like, I kind of had these questions. Don't get me wrong. The movie doesn't really satisfactorily answer any of this, and I don't think it's that sophisticated. But I thought that at this point in the movie, we were getting back to what I was feeling in the very beginning, which was this interesting cutting and editing that created this real surreal, kind of dreamlike, kind of off-putting quality, all with that psychedelic music behind it that I just wasn't sure I knew what was going on.
You say interesting cutting and editing. I would say sloppy. Like, it feels like it's just slopped together.
Well, you see the scorpion again, you see the kite again, you get to see it calls back to those things that I'm thinking these are symbolic. I feel like he was trying to create sort of an art housey type movie because it certainly has a bit of that feel to it.
I guess, but it's not well done. Like,
no.
I'm pretty sure that Nadine watches Omar and Linda bang. And then Linda wakes up from that to more psychic calling, and she's just buck naked, just strutting around. Mm-hmm. And then I can't imagine that this was for a stylistic purpose, but you've got this shitty handycam shot of Nadine, or one of them, walking up, it's Linda, I think, walking up this spiral staircase. Now, that the space in which it is shot is beautiful, and it's lit really in an interesting way. It's like red and she's in white and walking up this winding staircase. But it looks like somebody's shooting it on their phone. Like, it's shaky.
Yeah. I thought it was a little voyeuristic.
All right, that's fair. If it's meant to be a POV shot,
yeah,
okay. I don't know if that's the case, but if so, then okay.
She's kind of found herself to that house. So, like, this is super clunky. There's like a house.
I think that Nadine is in the same hotel that they're in. I think that, I think she's just in a different room.
Oh, really?
I think so. I don't know. I could be wrong. But because Linda just wakes up and gets out of bed with Omar and walks around and ends up in Nadine's room.
Well, yeah, she like walks around outside. She's like outside climbing steps.
Is she outside?
Like, yeah, there's a shot of her. She wakes up from Omar. She walks outside. Then there's a shot of her walking up the steps outside to this big house, which is called the Ursulum house or something. I don't remember it. Like, it's referenced earlier.
Oh, okay. Well, I missed that. But it's not Nadine's house.
No.
It's not the beach house.
It's not the beach house. No, this is like Nadine. It's referenced later. We don't really know what it is. All we see is that Nadine is in there. There's this really long scene, like you referenced earlier, that's just this long exposition where she's telling nobody in particular except
Morpho.
She's basically saying, this was my father's house. It was 100 or 200 years ago. I don't remember. But suddenly the Count appeared, Count Dracula. I looked down and I saw fighting going on outside, and there were soldiers in battle and stuff. And Count Dracula was killing people, I guess, and he stuck a knife into the soldier lying on top of me. Honestly, I couldn't figure out what all this was.
Some forces were like raiding or pillaging that village, and they were raiding the homes and raping women in the street.
Right.
And Dracula rescued her from that, but then bit her and presumably became her lover, and
she didn't like it.
Came back to her night after night, and eventually when she was on the point of death, then he turned her and made her a vampire. But she doesn't like men. She is Vampyros Lesbos.
Yes. And she says women are captivated. She's captivated by women, and women are captivated by her. So she steals their identities and becomes them, is kind of what she says. And
which I don't understand.
I don't know. It's clunky to just throw all this into one dumb monologue that this woman just lays on a sofa and just speaks to the air. But that's what we get. So now we know why she's a vampire, kind of her relation to Dracula, and why she's a lesbian, a male-hating lesbian. Yeah, I guess we had to have a reason back in the 70s for this.
Yeah.
But she says out loud, now she's met Linda, and now I'm under her spell. I must initiate her into my circle.
Right. And so Linda somehow ends up in her room, and she's like in a trance, and Nadine gives her a chalice to drink from, and she does, and Nadine's like, she's like, that was blood. Did you know that was blood?
Did you notice that was blood? It's so stupid.
And then she says, "You're one of us now. The Queen of the Night will bear you up on her black wings." Blah blah blah. Then there's more lesbian sex.
Lesbian sex time. Intercut with Agra, who now has a sort of phallic. I guess.
Oh my God, she has a giant clown dildo. Yeah, somebody helped her out, and I don't think it's. Is it literally a dildo? I don't think that it is, but it's so phallic.
I don't think it is, but it's suggestive of a phallus. Yeah, that she somehow now has in her bed with her for some reason. That again, she's going through her ecstasy or whatever, and just kind of caressing it with her hands. It's so charmingly 1960s eroticism from Europe. Maybe I kind of like look a little more kindly on these things and roll my eyes in a different way than you do, because it just kind of tickles
because
my
of
bone.
your worldly sensibilities.
No,
and I'm just this dumb American.
No, it's because I think we have the same thing about the giallo. I just like this time period. I like the costumes and the things. I like the silly sensibility that is totally foreign to us now. The dumb cheesecake, like this is what turned people on back then. Obviously doesn't anymore. But I find that charming and fun to watch, as opposed to getting angry at it and wondering why I'm wasting my time.
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah, that pretty much sums up how I felt about it. So I guess.
Right.
Again, like I said, it's just that it's a bad movie. It's not about the lesbian sex and stuff like that. Like, I don't have any problem with that. It's just that the movie's not good.
No,
it wasn't fun to watch. It wasn't interesting. I was angry about it. I still am a little bit. Okay, so then Nadine feeds on Linda again, and when that happens, Agra freaks out. I don't really know why.
Yeah, probably just been passed on to the new person. She's been left out in the cold.
But then
she feels it.
It cuts to a scene in the psychiatric hospital where the doctor is like in his office or the lobby or whatever, and Omar, the boyfriend, is there, but he's like catatonic because he's lost a lot of blood. What? When? Why?
She bit him.
She did?
She bit him. There was a scene. Well, we never saw it explicitly, but it was implied, because after Linda got up and wandered around and they had their thing, there was a shot of Omar laying in his bed, but his eyes were open, but he wasn't moving. And Nadine was standing outside kind of staring at him. And I thought, okay, she's going to bite him next. But we don't see it happen, of course. But the doctor says, don't worry, it's okay. I mean, I've studied a lot of vampire lore. You are safe. You can't cross over into their world. But Linda is different. She's in danger. So this is after Omar suddenly wakes up and he's better, like a scene later.
Yeah, immediately, right.
And it's like, who knows how and why, like, the dots are connected by anybody in this movie, that suddenly now we're all talking about vampires very matter-of-factly and talking about who's in danger and who's not. Up until now, everything was supposed to be a great mystery. But now it seems like Dr. Seward kind of knew all along what was going on, and he was digging through his books to try to figure it all out.
Yeah, and
it's bizarre.
And so now we know that Nadine is into Linda, and Linda is a vampire, and the doctor says that she's in danger, and he tells her the only way you can kill a vampire is by, a fatal blow to the head. You either have to take an axe and split their head open, or you have to put a rod in their
pierce it with the bar.
Yeah, right, in their head. And so
that's some new vampire lore.
Well, which is fine. I mean, this it defies convention. She is out in the daytime all the time. So I have no idea what the vampire qualities are here, but that's how you have to kill them. You have to destroy their head. And then apparently they needed to. I don't know why this happens, but Igor. I don't know his real name, but Igor kidnaps Linda. and
this is so embarrassing. This scene.
Takes her to his torture cellar. Oh my god, it's so stupid.
Yeah, this is really dumb.
And goes on and on. Like you I suppose you could play the clips. I don't know how many German fans we have.
Diese Schönheit, göttlich und teuflisch zugleich. Zum Beginn dir Qual aufzuerlegen, sollst mich lieben. Ich bin es, der dir etwas antut. Du selbst hast es in der Hand zu wählen. Sage mir, ob du mir zu Willen sein willst, so wie die andere es war. Sie war glücklich. Komm, ich zeige sie dir.
He rambles for like 3 or 4 minutes about nonsense.
It's nonsense. It's random garbage. It's clumsy, and
and he says he's going to torture her because he loves her and he hates her. And is he the one who says something stupid like, my hate and my love for you are infinite?
Yes.
And he still has the last dead woman that she full knew well about and didn't tell anybody, so it's her own fault, I suppose. Then she tricks him into untying her, and she kills him with a hacksaw.
Which we don't even get to see. There's no blood or anything.
But because she's missing, Omar and the therapist, I don't know, one of these stupid men doctors, Omar and one of these stupid men doctors believe that Nadine must have her. So they go to Nadine's house and go in and are snooping around. And then Nadine says, "Morpho!" And Morpho shoots at them and they run away. Like, it's just the funniest thing. Like, we think that she's in there, but somebody shot at us, so we just have to leave. And like, that's just it.
And then they go to the nightclub again. We get to see the Countess do the exact same performance, more or less, all over again. In another 10, 15-minute exploitation scene of 2 women naked. That was the point at which I was like, oh, God. And it wasn't the first time, but I was definitely wandering around the house waiting for that to be done. But then at the end of this one, she actually bites that woman on stage.
And kills her, right.
And kills her, which it's not clear at the time, but later Omar says to the doctor, this local performer killed this woman on stage, plus Linda's missing and all that. I think they're all connected. And somebody had said something to him about the house on the hill. I don't know. Yeah. He very clumsily starts to put it all together. So they decide they need to go up to the house.
But they don't stay because they get shot at. And then immediately, we see Linda running on the beach towards the house. And she arrives. This makes no sense to me. She pounds on the doors. We are forced to look at that scorpion dying underwater. Now, obviously, this is meant to be symbolic, but it is just so heavy-handed. Like, I get it. But it doesn't make any...
Scorpion is the vampire, and now it's dying.
So she goes in, and Nadine is like, just in a garter belt and a scarf or something, laying on the bed, and she says, "The end has come for me." I don't understand what is happening here. Why is she dying?
I don't know what happened. I don't know. I'm not sure.
It seems like
Seward got choked out. We missed that bit. Seward got choked out by her familiar.
Oh yeah, whatever. Who cares?
Did she get shot at one point? Maybe she did get shot.
I don't remember her getting shot. I don't know what happens to her, but what it seemed like to me was that she needed Linda's blood, and I think she kind of says that to Linda, and Linda's like, nah.
Refuses.
Don't want to.
Well, she says, I don't want to be like you. I don't want to join you. Whatever.
But so then Linda bites Nadine's neck.
Yes.
and in my notes, I have Nadine dies, Agra comes, Linda stabs Nadine's head. Like that's the series of events. And then when she stabs Nadine in the head, she stabs her in the eye. We don't see it when it happens. Instead, we see cherry-flavored Kool-Aid spray up into Linda's face.
Right.
But we do then later see that it was her eye that had been stabbed because Morpho comes in, kisses the dead Nadine, and takes the spike out, and then kills himself with it.
Yes. This is, again, trying to be very artsy, I think, because it's like, it's just kind of in reflection and all this. It's so slow and it's just so boring. And then finally, the scorpion has now drowned. And I felt bad for that scorpion. I think they probably really drowned a scorpion,
I'm sure they did.
Screw those guys. And the kite falls out of the sky. And so, we kind of get that wraparound. So, it has some art to it.
Yeah. And Omar shows up, and he's with the doctor, and the doctor tells Linda, it was all just a dream. And she's like, no, it wasn't. The end. God.
Yep. Sailing away on their boat.
It was just really, really bad. And
we've seen worse.
There's a remake.
There's a remake?
Yes. You didn't know that?
Oh, cool.
There's a 2008 remake that I read follows the same story, if you want to call it that. I don't know.
Let's watch that.
No, let's not. In fact, I am thinking of movies to pay you back for this one, and I've already got one in mind. Just so
sweet.
You know.
Is this starting the dueling battle wars now?
Yes.
Are we entering a new phase of our relationship and our podcast right now, where now we're just actively trying to...
I'm going to make you watch some graphic gay male sex. You are going to be seeing dong all day.
Wow.
Anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, so I hated it. I do not, under any circumstance, recommend it. I have nothing nice to say about it. That's all.
I'm glad we finally watched a Jess Franco movie. I enjoyed seeing these beautiful women in this otherwise forgettable film.
The women are beautiful.
I did feel like there was some attempt at art, as much as he was willing to do, but not very strong attempt, and most of it failed. And he knows that. He wasn't making these movies for high art. This is definitely an exploitation film. It was intended to be that way. I didn't really expect much more out of it. I was pleasantly surprised by a few interesting shots and some interesting editing, and this killer score, which I kind of almost wish I hadn't seen the movie, because I don't want... It's like the score has been kind of spoiled by the imagery that it accompanies. When I was just listening to it by itself, while I'm cooking and hanging out around the house, which I was literally doing for weeks, I just loved it. Almost like I sometimes pull on some of those Argento Goblin scores just to kind of score my life. And now that, it's being associated with some of the claptrap in this movie, it's lost a little bit of its luster. But I still think it's a great score. A lot of people apparently do. And so, yeah, it had a few things to offer it. I don't feel like I wasted my time 100%, but this is not a movie that I think anybody should go out and see. It's just really not worth it.
No, and not because it's offensive. It's just bad. It's just not. It's not fun to watch.
You could fast forward through it if you're curious at all, but yeah, maybe we'll do another Jess Franco movie that's actually better. We'll see. I'm kind of curious about that Count Dracula movie from the 70s that he directed. It'd be interesting to see how that compares to the Hammer ones, since it's got some of the same people in it. right, well, thank you for allowing me to torture you, Craig, with Vampyros Lesbos. If you guys have, on the off chance, seen this movie, we'd love to hear what you think about it. Feel free to rip me a new one. Join our patron community and help us pick out these movies. We have nice little conversations going on our Patreon page, patreon.com/Chainsaw Podcast. Once again, this is Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.